Welcome to The Last Hike. Today I'm going over the Death Valley and covering the arrogant hiker who ridiculed a ranger over his heat warning, not knowing the karma that waited for her by morning. She walked into one of the hottest places on Earth with an ego too big to turn around, but what that record-breaking heat ended up doing to her body is one of the most horrifying things I have ever had to research. It was July 10th, 2021. And the thermometer outside the visitor center at Furnace Creek had already cleared 117 degrees before lunch. Death Valley was in the middle of the kind of heat wave that makes the national news. The week the official gauge would touch 130, one of the highest temperatures ever reliably recorded anywhere on the planet. To put that in perspective, a normal oven set to keep food warm sits not far above that. The parking lot at the Golden Canyon trailhead shimmered like there was water on it. Most people who pulled in took one step out of their air conditioning, felt the air hit them like an open oven door, and got right back in their cars to go find a viewpoint they could enjoy through a windshield. The radio that morning was full of heat warnings, the kind that tell people to stay indoors, check on elderly neighbors, and never leave anyone sitting in a parked car. And the whole region was bracing for a day that would break records. One of them did not. Her name was Leanna Marchetti, 28 years old, and to thousands of people online, she was a full-time adventure influencer. Her whole brand was being the fearless one, the girl who did the thing everyone else was too scared or too sensible to do, and she had the numbers to prove that people loved watching it. She had built that following over years, one bigger risk at a time, swimming in places with signs that said "do not swim," climbing things that were roped off, walking up to wild animals other people backed away from. The trouble with a brand like that is that it has to keep escalating. An audience that follows you because you are fearless gets bored the moment you start looking careful, and Leanna knew it. Every video had to be a little bolder than the last one, a little closer to a line, and the comments rewarded her every time she leaned further out over the edge. She had come to Death Valley in the worst week of the entire summer on purpose, because heat that made the news made for views, and a video of her conquering the hottest place on Earth in record temperatures was exactly the kind of thing her audience showed up for. She had the whole video planned in her head before she ever left the car. The dramatic walk into the canyon, the harsh light, a piece to camera at the top about pushing past your limits, and a caption about doing the thing everyone swore was impossible. It was going to be one of her best, the kind of post that pulls in a wave of new followers and a flood of comments calling her a legend. In a strange way, the ranger had handed her a gift, because now the video had a villain to wave off at the start, a perfect little setup for the triumph she was certain was waiting at the end. Here's the thing you have to understand about how she saw a place like this. To Leanna, a warning was not a warning, it was a setup for a better video. The scarier something sounded, the better the story when she walked away from it, smiling, unbothered, proven right. She had spent years training her audience to expect exactly that, and she had spent those same years quietly training herself to ignore the part of her brain that was supposed to be afraid. By the time she got to Death Valley, that part of her had been overruled so many times that it had basically stopped speaking up. I've seen her type before, the kind who built a brand on ignoring advice, so to her, a ranger saying no was just more content. Death Valley is not dangerous the way a cliff is dangerous, where you can see the edge and respect it. It kills you quietly, through a number on a thermometer that does not look like it should be able to hurt you. There is no claw, no fall, no single dramatic moment, just heat, steady and patient and absolutely without mercy. That is exactly what makes it so deadly, because a threat you cannot see and cannot feel sneaking up on you is a threat that is very easy to underestimate right up until the point where it is far too late to do anything about it. In heat like that, your body is in a fight from the second you step outside. You sweat out water faster than you could ever drink it back, and because the desert air is so dry, the sweat evaporates off your skin almost the instant it appears, so you often cannot even see that you are drenched and emptying out. The official temperature is always measured in the shade. Out in the open, on dark rock, in direct sun, the real temperature against your body runs far higher than whatever number the sign in the parking lot shows. People walk out into that believing the sign, never understanding that the sign was describing the easiest version of where they were going. By the time most people understand that difference, they are already deep into the canyon, already low on water, and already feeling a little off in a way they cannot quite put a name to. Death Valley kills people every single year, and the ones it kills are almost always the ones who came to look at it rather than to survive it. Tourists step out for a quick photo and go down within sight of the road. Hikers underestimate a short trail and never climb back out of it. The rangers will tell you the same thing over and over, that the desert does not care how fit you are or how many hard things you have done somewhere cooler. Fitness buys you a little extra time out here and absolutely nothing more. What actually keeps you alive is respect, water, and the sense to be shaded and still when the sun is at its worst. I tell people Death Valley in July is not a desert, it's a furnace with a parking lot. The hike she had picked was the Golden Canyon Loop, a route that climbs up through a maze of golden and red rock toward the famous overlook at Zabriskie Point and comes back down through a wash called Gower Gulch. In the cool months, it is one of the most beautiful and popular day hikes in the entire park, busy with families and photographers. In July, it is a different thing wearing the same name. There is no water anywhere on it, none, and there is no shade either, not a single tree, not one reliable overhang, just bare rock that drinks the sun all day and throws it back at you from every direction at once. The Badlands have one more trick to them, and it is the one that turns a heat emergency into a death. They look identical in every direction. The same bleached gold walls, the same dry folds and ridges, narrow side canyons branching off the main route like hallways in a building with no signs and no numbers on the doors. With a clear head and a marked trail, it is a wonderful place to wander. With a cooking brain and no landmarks, it is a trap that closes so softly you do not even hear it shut behind you. Search teams have pulled people out of those exact side canyons before, some of them only a short distance off the main trail, close enough that on a clear-headed day they could have walked back out in minutes. I've walked those Badlands, and there's no shade out there. Not a tree, not an overhang, just rock throwing heat back at you. The man standing near the trailhead that morning was a ranger named Cal Renfro. Cal had worked Death Valley for the better part of 30 years, and in that time he had helped carry more than a few people out of these canyons, some of them walking and shaking and lucky, and some of them not walking at all. Summer was the season he hated, because summer was when people came from all over the world to see the famous heat, treating a killer like a tourist attraction, and a certain number of them every single year decided that the warnings were meant for somebody else. He had learned over the decades to read people fast, because reading them fast was sometimes the only thing that saved them. He knew the difference between the hiker who was nervous and prepared and the hiker who was confident and carrying nothing. He knew that the dangerous ones were almost never the ones who looked scared. They were the ones who looked sure of themselves. The ones who had clearly done risky things before and gotten away with it, because getting away with it was exactly what taught them they could not be hurt. Cal spotted Liana the moment she stepped out of her car with a phone already pointed at her own face. Cal spent 30 years pulling people off that trail. When a man like that tells me to turn around, I'm back in my car before he even finishes the sentence. He did what he always did. He walked over, friendly but serious, and told her plainly that she should not attempt the loop today. He told her it was already over 115 degrees and still climbing, that the canyon would be hotter still with no air moving through it, and that people had died on easier hikes than this one, in less heat than this. He pointed at the small bottle clipped to her bag and told her that was not nearly enough water, that a hike like this in this heat needed gallons, not a bottle. He told her that if she truly meant to do it, she had to start at first light the next morning, not late on a day that was already an emergency. None of what Cal said was an opinion, and none of it was him being dramatic. It was the same message printed on the big signs all around the parking lot, the ones with the red letters that exist precisely because so many people have died doing exactly what she was about to do. The park does not send rangers out to warn people at that trailhead in a heat wave for fun. It puts them there because that specific trail, in that specific heat, has a body count, and because a friendly human voice saying "turn around" saves more lives than any sign ever has. Cal had personally turned a lot of people back over the years. Most of them, when it came down to it, listened. Liana did not listen. She turned the camera on him instead. For her followers, she narrated the whole thing as it happened. This overprotective ranger who thought a little walk was going to kill her, who so clearly did not know who he was talking to. She let him finish, thanked him with the kind of smile that was really a dismissal, and told him she would be totally fine. She did stuff like this all the time. Then she clipped her one small bottle back onto her bag, fixed her hair in the camera, and started up the trail into the canyon while he stood there and watched her go. There was nothing he could legally do to stop a grown woman from taking a walk in a national park. She was not the only person Cal spoke to that morning, and she was not the only one who had shown up wanting to hike. The difference was that the others listened. A couple turned around right there in the lot and decided to come back at dawn instead. A young guy who had planned the very same loop took one more look at the heat shimmering off the rock, thanked the ranger, and went to find an air-conditioned diner. None of them got a video out of it, and all of them are still alive. That is the quiet, unglamorous truth about this place, that the people who leave with nothing to post are usually the ones who leave at all. I've watched that clip more than once. She rolls her eyes at Cal while he tells her people die out here. I have thought a lot about what was going through her head as she walked away from that man. I do not think she was being brave, and I do not even think she was being stupid in the way we usually mean it. I think she had simply done this exact thing so many times, ignored so many warnings, and walked away fine that the warnings had stopped carrying any weight at all. Cal was not a 30-year expert to her. He was just one more worried voice to wave off on the way to the shot she wanted. No different from a comment telling her to be careful that she would scroll right past. She started up Golden Canyon a little before 11 in the morning, which is just about the worst possible hour to begin. The early part of the trail was everything she had come for. The walls rose up around her in deep gold and rust red. The light was harsh and dramatic in a way that looks incredible on camera, and the footage she shot in that first half hour was really beautiful. She was moving easily, the trail rising only gently as it wound up into the canyon, narrating as she went, smiling, vindicated. There was no reason in those first minutes for her to feel anything but good about her choice, and that, more than anything, is how the desert gets you. Heading into those canyons at noon never feels dangerous in the moment, and that's the trick of it. I've watched the desert let people walk in. The trail drew her deeper in. She climbed up the side spur toward Red Cathedral, a towering wall of rust-colored rock that is one of the most photographed spots on the whole route, and then pushed on up toward Manly Beacon and the high point of the loop. Down in the lower canyon, the rock walls pressed in close on both sides and trapped the heat like an oven with the door shut. No breeze at all, not a breath of moving air to carry any of it away. Higher up, where the trail climbed out of the canyon and into the open badlands toward Manly Beacon, the walls fell away and took even the idea of shade with them, leaving her out under a sun that did not let up for a second. She was sweating hard now, though in that dryness she still could not see it, and she was reaching for her one bottle far more often than she had planned to. What made the first part feel so easy was also exactly what made it so dangerous, and she had no way to feel that yet. The trail climbs the whole way in, gaining hundreds of feet up through the wash and out into the open badlands toward the high ground around Manly Beacon, and the hardest, most exposed stretch of the loop was still ahead of her. Every comfortable step in the cool of the morning carried her deeper into the maze and farther from the only safety there was, her car back at the trailhead. She felt strong and capable and completely right. The desert was simply waiting for the heat of the afternoon to hand her the bill. The first part of that trail feels easy, a gentle walk up a pretty canyon. I promise you that's just the desert letting you get far from your car. By the time she reached the upper section, somewhere in the early afternoon, the temperature down in that open canyon was well past anything the visitor center sign had shown that morning. This is the part of these stories that people who have never stood in it cannot quite picture. It was not uncomfortable the way a hot day at home is uncomfortable. It was a physical force, a steady pressure leaning on her from every direction, the air itself too hot to take any heat away from her no matter how hard or fast she breathed. Her pace fell off. The filming, the entire reason she had driven out here, slowed and then mostly stopped because the heat had begun to demand everything she had just to keep putting one foot in front of the other. By the middle of the afternoon, the canyon had become something close to a kiln. The walls threw heat at her face and her back at the same time, the ground cooked up through the soles of her shoes, and the air gave her nothing to work with no matter how deeply she breathed. She had stopped filming a while ago. The bright, chatty narration of the morning was gone, replaced by the simple animal work of moving forward through air that felt like it was trying to hold her in place. She was deep into the loop now, too far along for turning back to feel obvious, and nowhere near close enough to the end for finishing to be safe. There is a cruel arithmetic to a loop trail in heat like that, where the safest choice and the fastest choice stop being the same thing, and a tired brain almost always grabs for fast. Somewhere on that upper stretch, her water ran out. The small bottle that Cal had pointed at and warned her about, the one she had clipped back on with a smile, was empty hours before she could possibly be back at her car, and there was not one more drop anywhere on that trail. From that moment, she was on a clock that could not be stopped or reset. She was losing water with every breath and every step, in temperatures that would not begin to drop until long after dark, with the hardest climbing of the loop and the long descent through Gower Gulch still standing between her and the parking lot. She carried one little designer water bottle on a hike that needed a gallon. In that heat, that bottle is not water, it's a timer. The first real trouble was almost certainly a headache and a creeping dizziness, the kind of thing that is easy to argue yourself out of for a little while when you are determined to finish. But in heat like that, the body does not give you long to negotiate. As she kept moving, her core temperature was climbing past the point a human being can survive, and the warning signs were stacking up one on top of another. The pounding head, the wave of nausea, the strange and sudden heaviness in her legs that no amount of willpower could lift. At some point, and this is one of the most dangerous moments of all, her skin would have stopped feeling sweaty and started feeling hot and dry. That is the signal that the body's entire cooling system has failed, that it has run out of water to sweat with and simply given up trying. From there, the internal temperature rises fast, and the organ that suffers first and worst is the brain. The very tool she needed most to save herself, clear and careful thinking, was the first thing the heat reached in and switched off. Heat stroke doesn't feel like just being hot. Your judgment is the first thing to go, so the moment you need to think clearly, your own brain stops helping you. And this is where the desert does its cruelest work, because once the thinking goes, everything else follows. A clear-headed person in trouble turns around and retraces their steps straight back to the trailhead they know. Liana, by every later reconstruction of what happened, did the opposite of that. Somewhere up in the maze of the upper Badlands, she left the main trail entirely, turning off into a narrow side canyon. Whether she was chasing one last shot, or convinced it was a shortcut, or simply no longer able to tell the difference. The marked loop was hard enough in that heat. Off the trail, in that terrain, she had just walked into the one place nobody searching would think to look first. Investigators believe she did try to keep going for a long while, the way determined people do, pushing through signals that should have stopped her cold. But heat does not respect determination. The very grit that had built her whole career, the refusal to quit, the certainty that she could power through anything, was now working directly against her, driving her forward and burning through her last reserves when the one thing that might have saved her was to stop, find whatever sliver of shelter existed, and wait for the cool of night. Her greatest strength had quietly turned into the thing walking her toward the edge. Those canyons all look the same inside, like a maze cut from an oven. You don't feel lost in there until you already are. The side canyons of the Badlands are a trap built for exactly this situation. They branch and fork and double back on themselves, every wall the same washed-out gold as the last, and they swallow sound and phone signal alike. The phone she trusted for absolutely everything would have been useless to her by now. No service down in the rock, and a battery cooking past the point it would even turn on. She had no paper map, no compass, no extra water, and no clear idea anymore of which direction would take her back. She was wandering, slower and slower, through a place that offered her the same blank answer every way she turned. Time worked against her now, in a way she could not feel. Every minute she spent lost was a minute of water she did not have, in heat that was still climbing toward its afternoon peak. She had told no one her exact plan beyond the ranger she had laughed at. No friend was waiting at the bottom with a worried eye on the time, no partner was tracking her location on a phone, no one in the world who loved her knew precisely where she was or when she was supposed to be back. She had traded all of that away long ago for the freedom to do whatever she wanted, and out here that freedom had nothing left to give her. What followed was slow and disoriented, and, from the outside, almost quiet. She moved through the side canyons with no real direction, the walls all the same, the sun straight overhead and then sliding west, every turn looking like a way out and ending in more rock. She had no shade to rest in and no water to wait on. The smart move, if any move was still smart by then, was to stop and conserve. But a confused, overheating brain rarely makes the smart move, and hers was already past making much of any decision at all. Even if she had somehow been able to call for help, the rescue most people quietly assume is always waiting was not a sure thing on a day like that one. Helicopters do not fly the same in extreme heat, because the thin, superheated air gives the rotor blades far less to grab onto, and operations in the worst of the afternoon get much harder and sometimes get grounded entirely. The people who could have come for her, with no idea she was in trouble, no idea she had left the route hours ago, and no way to reach the fold of Badlands she had wandered into even if somehow they had known to try. Everybody out there is quietly counting on a helicopter. In that heat, the air gets too thin for the rotors to lift, And that's a bet I would never make. Heat stroke, once it truly takes hold, moves through the body in stages, and not one of them can be willed away by wanting it badly enough. The confusion deepens into something close to drunkenness. Coordination goes so that walking a straight line becomes impossible. As the core temperature keeps climbing, the organs begin to fail in sequence, and the overheating brain shuts down its higher functions one by one, the way a building powers down floor by floor. A person that far gone stops being able to make a plan, then stops being able to stand, and finally stops being able to do anything at all but sit down where they are. There is a moment where your legs simply stop listening. You are awake, you are scared, and your body has already decided it is finished. Eventually, her body did the deciding for her. The walking slowed to a stagger, the stagger to a few steps at a time, and then to nothing. Somewhere up that dead-end wash, she sat down in the only patch of ground she could reach, and she did not get up again. There was nothing dramatic about it, nothing like the movies, just a strong young woman quietly running out of everything a person needs to stay alive in a place that had been trying to tell her exactly that since the moment she stepped out of her car. The desert did not cool off anywhere near fast enough to save her. Even after the sun finally dropped behind the ridgelines, the rock held the day's heat for hours and kept breathing it back out into the dark, and by then, the damage inside her was long past undoing. She was off any trail, a searcher would walk in the dark, tucked up a sidewash in the Badlands with a dead phone and an empty bottle, in a silence so total that most people will never experience anything like it in their lives. All those followers, all that constant noise that had filled every single day of her adult life, and there was not another person anywhere near her in that black stretch of desert. Thousands of people watched her that week, and she died with not one of them within 50 miles of her. The desert never once cared how many followers she had. Liana Marchetti died that night in a side canyon of the Golden Canyon Badlands of hyperthermia, her body finally overwhelmed by a heat it was never built to withstand, only a handful of hours after she had smiled into her own camera and waved off the one man who tried to save her life. She had come to the hottest place on Earth to prove that she could beat it, in the worst week anyone had ever picked to try, and the desert did to her exactly what the ranger had said it would, on very nearly the timeline he had laid out. She was never going to win that fight. She had walked away from her one real chance of surviving it. The moment she walked away from him, her rental car sat alone in the Golden Canyon lot through the evening and deep into the night. She had come to the park by herself, with no one expecting her anywhere, so there was no worried phone call to start things sooner, just that one car that never left. In a heat wave like that, rangers keep an eye on the popular trailheads, and when the car was still there long after dark, the Park Service knew someone had gone in and not come out. At first light the next morning, they began to look. It still took them well into the morning to find her, off the marked loop, up a dead-end sidewash she never should have entered. The Inyo County coroner ruled the cause of death as hyperthermia, heat stroke, the very thing the signs in that parking lot warn about in big red letters, the very thing Cal Renfro had stood there and told her to her face. On the phone recovered with her body, investigators found all of it: the gorgeous Golden Canyon, the bright, confident narration, and near the very beginning, the clip of a park ranger calmly trying to talk her out of the exact hike that ended up killing her. She had filmed her own warning, she had filmed herself laughing it off. And the thousands of people who had spent years cheering her on for being fearless were left to sit with what fearless had finally cost. Cal told her face to face how this would end, and she filmed it for laughs. He drove home that night safely. Meanwhile, she lost her life in one of the most brutal ways possible.